Hey guys, welcome back to another top 10 video. Since finishing my video on the top 10 best and top 5 worst characters, I wanted to do one a little more specific and talk about the skills that you use in season. So either next week or the week after, you can expect to see one on bursts. For today though, we'll be discussing the top 10 elemental skills which impact. Reading elemental skills is a whole different ones compared to units, since you're trying to ascertain the value of a skill isolated from the context of its own. Because of this, there needs to be questions answered, and if you've got most stats,
I guess I can't use their free heals anymore.
But the two beyond it need to hear this video is I have my priorities, you have yours. Besides, this is less of a meta thing and more of a fun rank. As you know, a character's skill and burst often have interactions with the rest of their kits, from talents to constellations, sometimes each other. When attempting to disconnect an elemental skill and evaluate it in a vacuum, are we considering the external components too, or just a skill within its own context? What about skills that can only be performed in the burst, or vice versa? How are we going to judge that? For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to disregard abilities that are too intertwined with the rest of the character's moveset as a whole, and only count talents and constellations that explicitly state the ability's name in their description. On that note, since 5-star constellations are understandably more impactful, I'll only be going to C2 for 5 stars, while 4 stars will go to C6. Last but not least, I'll prioritize skills that have the best overall usability in conjunction with practicality. And I'm not trying to go too deep into this, as ultimately it's all good fun. Let's not waste any more time on this one. For our first choice on the list, we have our sponsor for today, Tower of Fantasy. Aha, I gotcha, didn't I? Tower of Fantasy is sponsoring my channel once again to continue showcasing their version 3.7 update. In case you need a refresher on what this game's all about, it's a frequently shared open world cross-platform MMORPG where you can team up with other players to fight bosses, explore the world, and ride special vehicles. As a special promotion for version 3.7, they're having a collaboration with Neon Genesis Evangelion, which has been going on for the better part of this month already. Having just released Asuka as a playable character last week, this week they're also making Rei playable as well, who in my opinion is a better waifu, and I'll fight you if you think otherwise. Rei will be available starting March 28th, in other words today, alongside our release, new simulacrum missions, and more importantly, Mecha Simulation Raid will be made available for you to test the two characters out on, full of each offering an extensive selection of rewards upon completion. Also, something extra there including Rei is their future Zakro skip, which you can get from now until April 3rd. For returning players, this is a great opportunity to get back
Curious is just gone for now.
Order reissue, where you have the chance to acquire all the characters you missed out on, and they'll help you work on them with another round of supply runs and collaboration events.
Let's go beat up these bitches
also in the description
without
to check
her.
out the new stuff. So get to Tower of Fantasy for sponsoring the video, but let's talk about the actual list. Kicking off the list, and as per usual, this is in no particular order, we have Furina Salon Solitaire. This is easily one of the best elemental skills when it comes to off-field damage and application, which is the main distinction to make between hers and the likes of Shinto and Yelas, that it's an elemental skill. She summons 3 bubble companions that follow the active character, dealing hydro damage to anything that moves, with each one draining the party's max health to empower their attacks. This hero's attacks the fastest, but has the lowest power, followed by the Octopus, who's sort of in the middle, and the Crab, who's the slowest, but hits like a truck. The application is passable enough for Salon Solitaire to provide you with most, if not for teams such as Hyper Bloom or Taser, and while the HP drain may be inconvenient, it's more than worth it given the sheer damage output Furina's skill has. Best of all is that it had
I forgot I haven't
a 20-second cooldown, giving it overflow on time. So
got my equipment yet since I rested.
With Furina's A4 talent, she can boost the DPS of Salon Solitaire even further. Elemental skills have the privilege of capitalizing on the golden trip set for even more damage. The one downside is that you will be stuck with your Sia version on account of not having access to Furina's charge attack, but that's hardly an inconvenience, as most if not all the time you'll prefer that one anyway, easily deserving of a spot on this list. Next skill will be Visual's Night Ride. Everyone calls Bennett a walking elemental burst. Visual is most certainly a walking elemental skill. The sole reason putting her in contention for the strongest electro unit in the game is because of her trusty familiar Oz. Remaining in position upon summon, he repeatedly strikes nearby opponents once per second for electric damage in a small AoE, simultaneously generating 2/3 of an elemental particle per consistent battery. On its own, it doesn't seem all that impressive, but Night Rider has a few supplementary components that really add to its strength. Visual's A4 passive as Oz deal follow-up electro damage whenever an electro-based reaction is triggered, essentially reapplying electro to that target. Special about this passive is that there's no internal cooldown attached to it, giving Visual bar none the highest electro application in all of Genshin, and the damage isn't half that either. But wait, there's more. At C6, Oz gets to stay on field for 2 seconds longer and deals 30% of Visual's attack as follow-up electro damage. If you remember, Oz generates energy with each attack, so this is damage, uptime, and battery all in one. The obvious downside is that you won't be able to extend Night Riders since you won't have Visual's Burst along with it. 12 seconds should be more than enough to obliterate any group of enemies in the game. Worst case scenario, you can always compensate with a sacrificial bow. Next skill will be Shinobu's Sanctifying Ring. Like Visual, almost the entirety of Shinobu's value is housed in her skill, any easy choice. At the cost of some health, she creates a ring following the active character that pulsates for electro damage every second and a half that also heals the active character for a fair amount. At a 12-second duration and 15-second cooldown, that time is pretty good and can accommodate for longer rotations as opposed to an 8 or even 10-second skill. But if you have Constellation 2, the duration matches the cooldown, letting you refresh it right when it wears off. This is effective mostly for Dendro teams, not so much over Vape and Taser, but you really can't go wrong with a skill that provides healing and consistent electro application. It is rare to find an elemental skill that heals and follows you around with permanent uptime. Usually that's attached to elemental bursts, and even then they're few and far between. Shinobu's second passive talent increases both the healing and damage based on her elemental mastery, which is a nice touch, adding a layer of hybrid scaling to a character who was already incentivized to go DM anyway. Between Visual and Shinobu, the former is the more offensive one while the latter is more well-rounded. Next skill, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, is Rutao's Guide to Afterlife. If we go by the time she was released, this was by far the most powerful elemental skill the Genshin community has ever laid eyes on. With a 9-second duration and a 16-second cooldown, it's kind of stingy duration-wise. I wish it lasted like 2 or 3 seconds more, but I completely understand why it's kept at only 9, as Rutao converts a portion of her max health into bonus attack. With sufficiently high base HP, you're staring at easily over 2000 attack. It's twice the strength of Bennett's elemental burst that you can activate at the press of a button. Then it converts your charge attack to activate instantly, imbues it with Pyro, and applies a debuff to opponents hit by said charge attack for a chunk of damage every 4 seconds. Constellation 1 lets you perform charge attacks at no cost of stamina, and with the first passive talent there's even some party utility to the tune of 12% bonus crit rate for 8 seconds, which can somewhat make up for the 7-second downtime while you switch between the rest of your party members to reactivate buffs. In terms of raw power, Rutao's skill has to be the best of its kind. I still can't believe this trick was released in 1.3. Moving on, we have Raiden Shokun's Transcendence Baleful Omen, a very long-lasting skill with a cooldown less than half of the duration, ensuring more uptime than you physically know what to do with. Whenever you deal damage to opponents, an additional electro attack will follow soon after for a fair bit of damage. While this ensures consistent electro application for things like Hyper Bloom, although not really for Taser or Quicken since you need far more application, the real cherry on top of this ability is, of course, the elemental burst damage increase. With this effect, everyone's burst damage increase is based on 30% of the cost of the attack. So hypothetically, if you have a burst that has 800 energy cost, that's 30% more damage added to their burst, which is an incredible buff to have on a burst, much less a skill, especially in tandem with the consistent follow-up damage. Unfortunately, none of her talents or constellations expressly include her skill in their descriptions, so you do miss out on things like the electro damage bonus from A4. But in practice, I still consider this one of the best skills in the game for the sheer fact that it's one of those abilities you don't have to think about. It is the most generous duration relative to the cooldown, so you'll basically never have to worry about accidentally using your combos after it expires. If you run a team of all burst attackers, for instance her iconic national team, so much mileage out of her skill. I would not mind having this extracted out of her kit. Next one's gonna be Kazuha's Chihayaburu, which if you didn't know, is translated into 1,000 of swords. A little bit of etymology for you. Anyways, this might be a more controversial choice, but I chose this less for the sheer impact and more for the convenience. Kazuha's skill has him briefly jump or launch himself upwards depending on whether you tap or hold the skill, creating a vortex that launches and draws enemies caught towards the center of the attack, which he can then follow up with an empowered plunging attack that comes with elemental absorption. It's a fairly strong one at that. The first Ascension passive deals 200% of Kazuha's attack as damage corresponding to the absorbed element, and being a plunging attack, it counts as a heavy attack, meaning it can deal significant damage to both material and elemental shields. Additionally, you can cast this wall in the air for more verticality. This includes wall gliding. Granted, you do miss out on that critical elemental damage bonus from his A4, diminishing the combat pressure of the skill by a significant margin, but in terms of traversability, crowd control, not to mention having a respectively short cooldown when you add Z1 to it, it's still a great skill and overall convenience. I feel like people underestimate crowd control unless it's something extreme like Venti's ultimate, but Kazuha's skill is the heartbeat of his kit even without his A4. Besides, this is my list, and Kazuha is one of my favorite characters to use in the overworld and in battle. This next one will definitely, absolutely not be controversial. I might consider this the single most powerful elemental skill in Genshin Impact because literally everyone would want this as a spare elemental skill. Chomei's Dominus Lapidus. This motherfucker. This thing single-handedly annihilated any semblance of difficulty in Genshin for like the first 2.5 years. I remember when people were talking about how, the corrosion dot damage can burn through shields. Little did they know, corrosion takes like 5 years to kill you from 100 to 0. It's only a threat when you're taking damage at the same time, but you're not losing a single point of health with a 20k plus HP shield. a staggering HP scaling of 23% plus a base of 2700 that's basically multiplied by 1.5 times for the universal damage mitigation. This is without question the most powerful shield to me. Adding on to that, the shield gets even more resilient, gaining 5% shield strength every time it gets hit. Pair this up with the natural invincibility frames afforded to virtually all elemental bursts, you'll seldom if ever encounter a situation where the shield breaks before you can refresh it. Speaking of which, like all other Archons, Zhongli's skill has permanent uptime, a 20-second shield duration and a 12-second cooldown, so every 12 seconds you get a 5-figure shield value that also comes equipped with a 20% elemental and physical resistance shred to nearby enemies, essentially increasing your damage output by 25%. In the overworld, you can enjoy the instant mining effect of the hold skill and the many penis jokes you can make with the stone pillars. That's the real selling point of the ability, let's be real here. But in all seriousness, Zhongli's skill is excellent. It's a shame you can't get a second one from the C2 as that's attached to his burst, but realistically with a sufficiently built Zhongli, you don't need to have 2 shields on. It makes your team practically invincible, gives super armor by virtue of being a shield, increases your team's damage no matter what type of element they are, and even offers a bit of geo damage on the side. If I ordered this list, this would most definitely be number 1. 3 more to go, let's wrap this up. Next skill will be Yaemiko's Yakan Evocation Sessho Sakura. I like this skill because it's another one of those always there type abilities. A small dash that spawns a totem behind it, periodically dealing electro damage to a nearby enemy. For each one that's on the field, the other ones get stronger too, with a maximum of 3 being available. Each totem has an individual duration of 14 seconds and a recharge timer of 4, letting you reposition them whenever you need to. The DPS and coverage of this skill is nothing to scoff at, especially when all 3 are trained on a single target. You can further increase that damage with Elemental Mastery thanks to her A4, and with C2 they can upgrade to level 4 and get 60% bonus attack range, making for an incredibly powerful skill. Most of the time, Miko's skill is the heartbeat of her kit, with some choosing to ignore the usage of her burst altogether. Like I said, the damage of this attack is exquisite when all 3 are attacking the same opponent, and there's just enough application to make her a decent choice for Taser and Quicken. Admittedly, it can be tedious to reposition them against opponents that move all over the place, but with C2's increased attack radius, that does alleviate things a bit. Also, I'm aware there are 4 Electro characters on this list. No, I am not biased. The Electro element has quite a few powerful skills, what can I say? Second to last one will be Nahida's All Schemes to Know. Initially I was torn on whether to include this, given a huge portion of its effectiveness is derived from Illusory Heart's various empowerments, but after thinking about it for a while, I'd say it still merits a spot on this list. When damaging enemies either with the tap or hold variant, up to 8 enemies get marked and tethered to one another, during which if any elemental reaction is triggered on said targets or they're struck by a Dendro Core, all marked enemies take Dendro damage, subsequently reapplying Dendro onto them for what is essentially permanent Dendro application. The trigger interval can only occur once every 2.5 seconds, but realistically that's all you need for any Dendro reaction that isn't spread. Like I said before, a significant amount of the actual threat of this attack is housed in an ultimate, which you won't have. However, that doesn't entirely negate the usefulness of Nahida's skill. As with the Archon peers, her skill has overflow of time, having a minuscule cooldown of 5 or 6 seconds, but a mark duration of 25, enabling you to easily maintain this effect on bosses without concern, and letting you apply it to new enemies that join the fight. With a massive cast range to boot, she's a one-stop shop for all your Dendro needs. Conveniently, it comes with the added benefit of letting you acquire harvestable items from a distance. I should also mention that her A4 can further increase the damage of her skill based on Elemental Mastery, and her C2 enables Dendro reactions to break enemy defense and critically strike. So even without Illusory Heart in effect, Nahida is bar none the best at what she does. Last but not least, we have Yelan's Lingering Lifeline, another skill that coincidentally happens to be used for traversability, but with more combat-oriented benefits to it. When cast, she breaks into a sprint that tethers nearby enemies, blowing them all up with big Hydra damage at the end of it and knocking them towards it. Yelan's skill is mobility, damage, and crowd control all in one. Best of all, she can get 2 of them with her first Constellation. A few things to make note of is that on top of Lingering Lifeline being faster than a sprint, unlike Sayu's skill, it also regenerates her stamina during that time, allowing for Yelan to basically sprint infinitely, especially with 2 charges of it. The damage is also excellent. Hydro isn't really known for one-shotting you unless your name is Mona, but with a 40% HP scaling at rank 10 and a fairly short cooldown of 10 seconds, Yelan's skill adds respectable damage to your team. Although of course, everyone knows the real source of her pressure is her burst, but that's for the burst video. In combat, the fast activation of the tap version can lend itself to quicksalt teams, generating a good amount of energy in the process. I find myself swapping to Yelan just to use her skill for battery even for non-Hydro characters. 40% HP scaling for a single attack is extremely strong combined with all the other benefits to it. It's not the best mind you, but one of those abilities you can never go wrong with. Okay, that concludes my list. What do you guys think? Were you expecting to see these characters, or did you hope I would include someone else? Skills are not as easy to judge and value compared to bursts. It really comes down to what you prefer: damage, support, even non-combat vectors. There were a few skills I'm sure you'll be asking about, like Wanderer, Ayato, Child, Qianyun, Kokomi, Naoya, and such, but I like to think the ones I made here are acceptable for many of you. Maybe Kazuha will be a head scratcher for some. If you want, feel free to share your own list down in the comments. For now, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at FarsFam, join my Discord server, and stay tuned for my Elemental Burst video coming out either next week or the week after. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Gold shard. Wait, I can just farm Phonolite, can't I?
Nani ka you ka? どうするのだ? 他に何か? 登録だな。ではな。
Now let's get the farming team to 40, why not? Shouldn't be hard to do.
らっしゃい。これにするんだね。ん？しっかりね。
いらっしゃい。なんじゃ、お主たちか。
Oops, haven't equipped their stuff yet.
てさて、何にするのじゃ？なんじゃ？何にするのじゃ？
I wonder if the iron armor is way slower or something. Let me look it up. Let me look up how the stupid speed, how armor counts into the calculation. Sword, then dagger. Sword, dagger, and knife. And then shoes are the fastest. Then bow, fist, clothing, sword, light armor, and helmets. Helmets are faster. Wands are very slow. guns, heavy armors, and rods that have more attack than physical than magic attack, and then artillery. Alright, here's some more better numbers. Alright, so swords are neutral, bows are +5, katanas are also neutral, staves are -5 or -15, rapiers are +10. So maybe I should give Mara a rapier instead. Tailsra can deal with all the bashing. Bashing isn't all that useful right now anyhow. Clothes are +5. Clothes and gloves are +5. Boots are +10. Rapiers and daggers are the fastest weapons. And the slowest weapons are, unsurprisingly, the guns. Yeah, heavy armor drops you off by quite a lot. How much do shields? Shields are -5, so...
装備を変えるのかよ。
I think I'll go for the Scorpio sword just because it's already max level. Very convenient. What about accessories? Accessories are neutral. If I want a bit more speed, I could go with gloves. And I think it'll be fine if I just went for a... What the hell is a green crown ring? Oh. Aim goggles might be good. Let's go for power.
装備を変えるのかよ。
So this makes her a plus 10 in speed. Liana's a +5. And it should be fine as long as it's a glove.
Nonjo, 装備を変えるのかよ。
Or just light armor. But sides do reduce speed by -5, so she's technically +0, which I suppose I don't mind that. Smara, I do believe, should be the one that goes first all the time. I assume agility is also counted towards turn orders. Then Raiman, Teosra are fine being super slow.
Sate sate, 何のご用かの?
These things are also super defensive. I do want the luck. There you go, because you don't need that much defense anyhow, I hope. Abili's gonna be a frontliner.
素材が足りのようじゃ。装備を変えるのかよ。どうするのじゃ。何にするのじゃ。装備を変えるのかよ。何にするのじゃ。装備を変えるのかよ。何にするのじゃ。どうするの。家事をするんじゃな。さてさて、何のご用かの。どうするのじゃ。なんじゃ。 家事をするんじゃな。
Welcome to Survive or Thrive, a brand new series where we see what would happen if you were permanently transported into a video game. We'll analyze 8 different aspects of the game's world and rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. At the end, we'll add them all up to figure out if you would just survive or truly thrive. So, you've just been magically placed into Super Mario 64's Mushroom Kingdom with no way of escape. How screwed are you? Let's start with the important stuff. Perhaps most important is water. You won't survive more than a week without water, or probably even half of that in a survival situation. Before you outright die of dehydration, you'll definitely get weaker leading up to it, so you want to find a water source as soon as possible. Thankfully, we're spoiled for water in this game. There's a ton of different sources throughout the different stages, as well as the castle itself. The waterfall in front of the castle might be the most useful, considering it's always flowing from an unknown source. Since it is unknown though, you still want to do your best to make it as safe as possible, which means boiling it. I was about to go into a whole thing about how difficult it'd be to get a fire going in this world. It's not impossible to start one without a man-made fire starter, but it'd be difficult. And while there are enemies that breathe fire, it'd be very dangerous to have to do that on a regular basis. I was gonna go into all that until I remembered there are some fires in the castle basement. You could grab a stick, light it up, and take it outside to boil your water. Not a good idea to have a fire indoors without a chimney. There you go, safe water to drink. You won't die of dehydration. I'll give water availability a 4 out of 5. It's really easy to get water, and you can clean it without putting yourself in harm's way. Though in the grand scheme of game worlds you could find yourself in, it could have been easier. A 4 out of 5 is fair, I think. Next is food. While you likely couldn't survive a week without water, you can make it by much longer without food. It heavily varies person to person, depending on how much body fat you have built up. And much like water, you'd be struggling long before you actually just die of starvation. So what food sources are available to you? Now, I'm not a marine biologist, so I don't know what type of fish this is, but I have a feeling you aren't going to get much sustenance out of them. But you probably need a lot of these to get enough calories for the day. Fortunately, there's something a bit bigger out there. In Tiny Huge Island, you can catch yourself a Bubba. Well, you can try. It's several times bigger than Mario, and you have no fishing rod. You could maybe fashion one together with sticks and some vines from this wall in Tall Tall Mountain, but this guy ain't getting caught with a Minecraft-ass fishing rod. Here's another option. Mario can't normally kill this thing. Mario doesn't know how to use tools. I'd say, fashion up a bunch of sharp sticks and start chucking them at Bubba. It might take a lot, but when you eventually do kill him, that'll last you a while, I bet. Cut them up into portions and store them for Cool Mountain. They'll last longer frozen. And if Bubba is too much trouble, get yourself some Koopas. According to this BBC article, a family in 1971 survived for 38 days at sea, just off turtles as well as some fish. If they can do it, why can't you? Something that will be a problem, though, is vitamin deficiency. I'm really racking my brain here, and I can't think of a single vegetable or fruit in this game. The only thing that might help you out are Pokies, because it seems like some cacti might have vitamin C in them. Vitamin C is useful for protecting against scurvy. You definitely don't want that. Overall, I'll give food availability a 2 out of 5. You'll be able to procure meat somewhat easily, but you'll definitely be deficient in some nutrients, to the point where it'll likely become a problem later down the line. Shelter is the final need, and I don't have to spend much time on this. You have a whole ass castle to live in. Though it doesn't really have any living space, so you have to make your own bed somewhere. Personally, I'd put one in here. It's nice and cozy. 5 out of 5. Let's talk about safety. In some game worlds, it'd be a fight for your life every single day just to make it to the next. Thankfully, Super Mario 64 isn't really like that. While there are some stages that'll definitely be dangerous to a normal human with normal human abilities, you can just avoid those. No reason to go on Rainbow Ride and fall down to the earth from the clouds above. You could spend most of your time in the castle if you wanted to. The only enemy outside of the main stages are these booths. And you don't have to come back here either. So as we touched on, you will have to journey out for food. Koopas and the Big Bubbas are only found in stages. There's one Koopa Troopa on Bob-omb Battlefield, and the only enemies between you and him are some Goombas. Goombas should be pretty easy to take out with a spear. You could maybe jump on them, considering Mario's just a little over 5 feet tall. Keep in mind though, you won't be able to jump as high as him. We'll talk more about that later though. As I said earlier, killing a Bubba would be a struggle. You could maybe figure something out, but messing up would not be good. Plus, if you get injured, there's no hospital to help you. The only sentient creatures around here are toads. I don't think any of them went to school to be a doctor. We'll give this world a safety rating of 4 out of 5. Day-to-day life might be a bit more dangerous in Super Mario 64 compared to real life, depending on your situation. There are much worse worlds to be in. This one's alright. Traversability. This is a big one for this game. Super Mario 64's Mushroom Kingdom wasn't built to be a believable, realistic world. It was built to jump around it. This is a platformer after all. It's fun to hop around levels and make death-defying jumps. But what does that mean for the average human? For simplicity's sake, let's say Mario is exactly 5 feet tall minus his hat. This is 5 feet right here. When he jumps, he gains about 5 feet as well. He can jump his own height. And that's without running started. And that's not even taking into account the double and triple jump. Mario is truly a beast when it comes to verticality. How high can you jump? When was the last time you ever even thought about jumping? It seems like the average human jump height is about 16 to 20 inches. The average height for an adult male is 5'7", and adult female is 5'3". Either way, you might have noticed 16 to 20 inches isn't exactly equal to 5 foot whatever. Fortunately, the average adult is a bit taller than Mario, so you can potentially grab ledges while standing that he couldn't before. You would need to get some pull-ups in to work out that arm strength though, if you want to be going through a lot of these levels. But if you wanted to stick to the castle and Bob-omb Battlefield, you don't need any sick moves to just survive. I'll give the world a 3 out of 5 rating for traversability. Yeah, you can make it through the simpler stages just fine, but if you needed to reach the top of Whomp's Fortress for something, or climb Tall Tall Mountain, you're gonna struggle. This world was not
I didn't realize
like us.
potentially
It was built for Italians.
I might be able to.
The next aspect is socialization. That might sound like a weird one, but hear me out. If you're going to be staying here until your dying breath, you probably want to be in the company of others. I know some people out there can love having all their lives, but most people aren't built for that.
There's technically an exploit question mark you can use to spend time without much effort and money. It will take time though, but if we go to the geomagnetic pole from the Eastern Shrine, which is an area that has no random encounters.
Nanda? Nanda?
Yeah, you can just walk around. Until time passes here. If you are really that desperate for farming.
Nanda?
Well, we don't need that.
何か用か。どうするのだ。
Believe it'll be better if I bring someone else. Okay, let's bring Umag. Or actually, let's
別のようか。
just make another farmer. I'm not feeling creative, so you're gonna be named after your purpose.
Hmm. どうするのだ。他に何かではな。
じっくり見ていくがよい。何にするのじゃ？何にするのじゃ？何にするのじゃ？装備を変えるのかや？どうするのじゃ？毎度あり。
I want to know how speed is calculated. I forgot the stuff.
何を売るのじゃ？取り何を
And
売
there's
る
the
のじゃ？
Phonolite.
今後ともよろしく頼むぞ。
らっしゃい。それじゃ聞かせて。やれや。受け取ってよ。どうするのかな？
Jesus Christ. There are equipment modifiers in 3 as well, as it turns out. So agility plus equipment modifier. Equipment speed mod plus 100 multiplied by agility multiplied by skill speed multiplied by a random number. Alright, so turn order has randomness. So it's your agility and then it's affected by a percentage based on your equipment. So if you're wearing no armor, it's just your agility, but if you have armor, you'll either go faster or slower depending on your armor. And of course, there's also the skill. Then there's the final modifier. of skill speed if it's applicable. Interesting, and it's a really large variance too. 90 to 110.
これにするんだね。ん？しっかりね。
はあ、もうお子さんの朝までお休みだね。いってらっしゃい。
Socialize is human nature. Without that, go crazy after a while. Sentient creatures inhabiting the castle here. Toads. Don't know what a human being would have in common with a toad, but I'm sure you could find something to chat about. Could probably even be able to assimilate to their culture after a long enough time. Become an honorary toad. That's what it'd be like to truly thrive in this world. But still are friends in one location with the same handful of beings. You get bored of them after a while. Angry. Sure invite pop up at some point. Such a small group, something's bound to go wrong after a long enough time. And yeah, Princess Peach exists, but I don't think you'd ever be able to save her. No offense to you personally, no human could traverse Bowser in the sky here. Not even an Olympic level athlete. So, to comment on a claim or assumption I made, leave it down below. Curious about your perspective. While there are some problems you might...
Kaitara Kazuha, the true Anemo Archon, is getting another rerun for version 4.5. And there's been a lot of discourse surrounding this character, whether or not he's fallen off, is he still a must-pull, and after testing it with every single character in the game, I'm going to give my definitive take so that I can help you decide whether you should get Canadian Aether and how to make the most of him if you do. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we've built and tested every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for in a build. There are not many characters that I personally would label as a must-pull, but Kazuha is one of them. Yes, of course, no character is usually a must-pull in Genshin Impact, and there have been more options that have released since the last time Maple Leaf Man reran, but he still fulfills a unique role in the game that is a very important and very impactful role that not many other characters can really do the same way. We will talk about his other options and his strengths and weaknesses more in the team section, but let's first talk about what makes him so meta-defining. His grouping really is unparalleled. Not only is it the strongest suction in the game, having a harder pull than Venti's, even though its range isn't quite as big, but it's also centered around grouping right around your character, which often makes it a lot more smooth and more effective to play. He also provides a very large damage bonus based on his elemental mastery. He does a great amount of personal damage with both his skill and his burst, and he wears one of the strongest artifact sets in the game, the Viridescent Venerer, which debuffs the enemies whatever element he swirls. The last one, of course, is not unique to him, but when combined with his peak grouping and his superior personal damage and elemental damage bonus, there really isn't anyone who does what Kazuha does. And because of that, he is often the best or one of the best choices for a huge number of the cast of characters. So if you want to make those certain characters shine, he is a character that you want to pick up. So let's talk about his performance on each of those teams. I'm not going to go in any particular order of importance, like this is an order as to what the best Kazuha teams are, but there's a whole archetypes of teams that he's just the best on. So for example, we've got Mono Pyro. Mono Pyro is basically Bennett, Xiangling, Kazuha, and then the final character, the peak being Lyney, but Klee is also a great option. Dea is even somehow viable here, and it's to the point where even Xinyan performs well. So, Mono Pyro is basically enabled by Kazuha. It really doesn't exist without him. However, there has been a new challenger that has approached Kazuha, and that is Chevreuse. And she doesn't make Mono Pyro, but Pyro plus Electro becomes a thing. So it's basically the same sort of teams, but you've got Electro character here, or you've got on-field Pyro with an off-fielder like Fischl here, and this is also one of Lyney's best teams. So what does this mean? This means that if you want to play characters like Lyney or Klee, they're not as reliant on Kazuha as they were before, especially for single target damage. However, when it comes to AoE, using a Chevreuse team will completely fail compared to Kazuha, unless sometimes if you try to teach with Chevreuse, then her AoE can make up for it, but even still, it's pretty darn cope, and then isn't even a Mono Pyro team at that point. So basically what I'm trying to say is that Mono Pyro used to be one of the premier ways of playing that particular character, whereas now you have other options other than Kazuha, but in AoE content, Kazuha still comes out on top. The VV Shred for the entire team, the Pyro damage bonus for the entire team, and the grouping for the entire team, and his personal damage is just too good to pass up. He does also the best in aggravate teams in my experience. I know on paper, and technically, Sucrose is technically just as good as Kazuha, if not can cheat slightly better if you use her with C6 and Hakushin Ring. In practice, however, I've never ever experienced Sucrose clears being as fast as Kazuha clears, except for maybe in single targets sometimes. But to me, one of Aggravate's biggest strengths is its AoE. Most of the time using a Dendro team in single target, you're better off using Hyper Bloom. So I would say if you do happen to use your Aggravate teams in single target a lot, Sucrose is comparable. But as soon as you go into AoE, Kazuha's personal damage, his grouping is just so high that it's hard to beat. So not only that, Aggravate teams are very, very flexible. Obviously, I've got Ching here because she's one of my favorite characters, so I wanted to play, but even Biden is a great character here. Sino is a fantastic character here. Yae Miko is probably the peak for a team like this, but if you've also seen my recent video, you've seen that Dori can work in an aggravate team, and being the healer, you can run Nahida, so Dori actually performs better than you would expect on this aggravate team. You can also use Sayu as an aggravate driver. The only aggravate team that doesn't work the best with Kazuha is maybe a Sucrose driver and Beto off-fielder aggravate team, because then you do get more Sucrose grouping and it can be good, or it can be better. So yeah, aggravate is a great Kazuha archetype, and it's a very free-to-play friendly team because it basically just throws Fischl, whatever defensive Dendrit you happen to have. If you have Baiju, if you have Kirara, if you have Yao Yao, whatever you happen to have, you can throw an aggravate team together and just whatever electric character you want on field, and you automatically do enough DPS to beat the game. So aggravate's one of my favorite free-to-play recommendations, and I personally just think, for me, I get much better clears with Kazuha. As you know, I'm a masher at heart, so Sucrose relies you to actually think and actually know enemy attack patterns, which, why would I want to think when I can just mash with Kazuha, is my mindset. And just overall, it's just much more practical, and like I said, you can throw whatever electro character you want, as long as they apply a decent amount of electro. The other thing you can do is run Kuki as your healer, run Nahida as your electro, and run Kazuha as your on-fielder. Give him sacrificial sword on this team, and this is actually a legitimate Kazuha team that's a bit more of an on-fielder, and I really like this team. I don't know if it's better than the other ones, but it is definitely comparable and definitely quite good. You can also put Dori, I guess. I don't know, some stuff like that. Kazuha is also best in slot on Novelette teams. I cover this team very extensively in my Novelette guide, so definitely go check that out if you want to see it. But I think that Kazuha is really, really good for Novelette. I know a lot of people like to say that Novelette doesn't need Kazuha because he has such good grouping, such good AoE all on his own. And I agree and I disagree. I think that Kazuha allows Novelette to take even more advantage of his great AoE, because sometimes enemies are spread out, and yeah, when you run enemies in this perfect line, yeah, Novelette is perfect. And since Novelette's release, they put enemies in like this perfect line every time they spawn, and it's really funny to me, but it's not always like that. And having Rupert is really, really good. So, Hyper Raiden is another one. This is Raiden, Bennett, Kazuha, and your Electro character. Your Electro character, obviously, if your Raiden is really well invested, C6 Fujo Sara is the best, especially if your Raiden is C2. But you can also run Fischl if you don't have C6 Sara, and Fischl performs excellently in single target. And Yae Miko is a great choice for multi-wave and AoE. Yae gets closer when you have a 5-star weapon. Technically, she is good in AoE because of her burst AoE compared to Fischl, but most of the time, for most people, Fischl will probably be better. The thing about this team, however, is Raiden teams, at least in single target, because this is still probably one of the best Raiden AoE teams, but at least in single target, Raiden Chevreuse is really, really an incredible team. Arguably the best Chevreuse team, and really just one of the best, one of my favorite teams just overall. It's so consistent, and my Raiden is very, very well invested. She is still just C0, but the well invested Raiden Chevreuse, especially when you get to higher Constellation, really starts outpacing Kazuha for single target damage, which is crazy, along with being much better in multi-wave. So sometimes it's even better in AoE, because Raiden does have good AoE all by herself. And in multi-wave, Kazuha has to come back in every time he wants to refresh his buffs and debuffs, whereas Chevreuse buffs are just always active. So if you can get away without the grouping, then Chevreuse is better. But there are still many scenarios, like as this current Abyss on the first half, that having the grouping is just really, really good, and it feels just super annoying to play without a grouper. There's also Ayaka team, so obviously Freeze is pretty much horrible without Kazuha. Pretty much any version of Freeze feels bad, except for obviously when Venti really, really works well, which is very rare in the Abyss, at least on floor 12. Venti's still great on the lower floors and stuff like that, but Kazuha just makes Freeze just infinitely better. And Ayaka has a couple options now. She has Farina Charlotte in these 2 slots, or Shenta Kotomi. I don't like Ayaka as much as I used to. They seem to have just been releasing content after content that hurts Freeze. I still do like Mono Cryo for bosses when when elemental application is good. You can use Charlotte with Thrilling Tales here, or you can use Layla and build her with Harbinger of Dawn for damage. And both of these teams Kazuha enables, and you also need Shenhe. And of course, you don't need Ayaka for this mono crowd. You can also use Raizumi, or you can use Ganyu. Where's that going? Oh, there she is. And I do actually like this team, especially for AoE. The Ganyu mono crowd team is actually like not insane, but it's good. Kazuha is also incredible for VV Futao with Yuan Bennett Kazuha, or you can do obviously Xingqiu Bennett Kazuha, or even Farina, although it's not quite as consistent, but could be it's not quite as consistent. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. But you can do Yoimiya on teams like this, and you can also do Xiangling, which is more of which is known as Kazuha National, which is very good as well. And of course, Xingqiu is more traditionally played compared to Yuan, although in practice, I feel like Yuan's just a bit better overall. You've of course got International, which is using Child as the main DPS. This is still to this day one of the best AoE teams in the game, and because of the elemental coverage, because of the grouping, because of Tartalia's AoE, because of Xiangling's high damage, this has always been one of the best teams for any given abyss that has AoE. It's pretty much unstoppable, although it is a bit tricky compared to a lot of other teams. You can also do Aito, although technically if you're Boba Swirl tech, which is swirling when Boba spits out his little fire. Sucrose can actually be better here, and Sucrose is technically, once again, especially for single target, most comparable for VV teams. So something like this is technically comparable for single target, but again, in practice, I find Kazuha easier to use, and especially better if there's any kind of AoE. So I do think Sucrose is very, very strong and a good option for these types of teams, especially for Vape. I think Vape is where Vape and Aggravate are where Sucrose is the closest, but even in those teams, I still just find it easier to use Kazuha. I think that Farina Bennett Kazuha core is also just extremely strong, and the on-fielder, like, it can be whatever you want as long as they're buffed by both by Bennett, Farina, and Kazuha. So, like, this team with Ayato, like, people always rag on Ayato. This team clears so well, like, it's so fast for AoE clears. But you can put Raiden here, you can put, I don't know, whoever else, anyone who gets buffed by Farina you can put here. You've also got Plunge Kazuha, where you're on-fielding your Kazuha, and you can either be built with Marisha 100 for more personal damage, or left on VV for more swirls. I tend to not really care. Either one is fine. If you want to use Kazuha on-fielder and, like, doing damage, this is one way to do that. Although Aggravate Kazuha is maybe more, like, in tune with his personal playstyles. People also asked about Virgin Kazuha, where you infuse his burst with Pyro, and the reality is, at least in my testing, you just get too much burning because of Kazuha's elemental application when he infused himself with Pyro. You just get too much burning because you have to basically run like Bennett or Dia. You have to basically, I don't know. I just get too much Pyro because Kazuha is using his burst with Pyro. So I'm not really a fan of Virgin Kazuha. You can just embrace the burning. If you're in AoE, you can do Kazuha Venti and do burning. It works in AoE, but it's not really recommended. It's not that good. It's just cool. It's good when Venti's good, and it's a fun team. You can also do like double activate with Venti, which I didn't talk about earlier, but that's using Fischl, and then you use that defensive Dendro, whoever it may be. This is pretty good as well, very fun. I also went together with a list of like a tier list of how needed I felt that Kazuha was, and I didn't do every single 5-star, but I just kind of put them in a list. Like, best in slot, these are characters that I would highly recommend you get Kazuha for, and you'll feel, if you main with these characters, you'll feel a very noticeable upgrade. And the next row is characters that he is part of a great team with, but it's not like necessarily that character's best team, so you have other options if you don't pick up Kazuha. I would say that if you make any argument about Kazuha falling off, it's like characters that like Raiden and Futao and Yoimiya and Lini, they used to have like no other options other than Kazuha. I would kind of lean towards putting Kazuha up here. It depends. It depends part of the team. It's like right at the top. But it's like, there used to be more characters where Kazuha was the best in slot. Now he's just part of a great team, which arguably could be best in slot, but it could be argued to be not. There's the solid option category, the cope category, and the nope category. So, you know, if you don't main any characters in the best in slot, maybe you can skip Kazuha, right? If you don't, but even still, even if you own a character and part of a great team and you want to main that character, I still recommend having Kazuha around for the option to play that great team. I don't exactly know what exactly. Remember. He is a solid option for Wanderer, especially if you have C6 farms on, because you can actually build Kazuha for damage on that team. It is really, really good. Maybe you could put that up here, especially when the grouping is really good for Wanderer. But I think Wanderer has enough stuff that he doesn't need Kazuha. Maybe Wriothesley goes here. At the end of the day, there aren't very many characters that I would put in the must-pull category, and Kazuha would be one of them. But of course, if you only main Navia, right? If you only main Ito, I don't know what this is. If you only main Navia, Ito, Eula, Milu, yeah, you don't need Kazuha, right? If you only main Alhaita, Navia, you main these characters. Or the reality is, you can't have one character that supports everything. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be characters that they don't support. And sure, if you own, I don't know why does Dea go? Oh, it's because Dea, like Plunge Dea, is just so much better nowadays. I mean, I don't know, whatever. Dea's tough. I don't know what to say about it. If you don't want to use Kazuha, there's definitely other options, unless you have one of these characters. And you guys get it. I hope you guys get it. He's still one of the most universal, best, uncontested supports. He's still very, very irreplaceable. Nobody really does what he does, and so you might as well get him if you have the pulls. But unless you main one of these characters, you can get away without him. I don't know what I get meant. But unless you main one of these characters, and like for Kokomi, I'm talking about on-field Kokomi. Unless you main one of these characters, there are other options that are comparable. But when Kazuha sings, it feels like nothing else. Like people were saying in the Novelette video, in the Novelette versus Kazuha video, it's like Kazuha won't help you clear floors the best way Novelette will. It's like, yes, he will, because a lot of the early floors, the reason why you don't succeed is because mobs are spread everywhere, and all you have to do is build your Kazuha, which is very, very simple and easy to do. And all of a sudden, just put him with a Pyro or Electro character, and all of a sudden his swirls are doing massive damage, and you're clearing floors just because you have Kazuha. So yeah, Kazuha good. Get Kazuha if you can. If you hate him, there's other options. For his build guide, this is a level 90 character. You need to level 90 and swirl damage, which is most of his damage, scales off the level, so do it. His talents do some damage, so if you want to level them up a little bit more than I have, they're all about equal priority. So the damage for normal attack is the damage when he slams down, and it does do anemo damage, so you do want to level that, you want to level his skill, and you want to level his burst. All of them are about equal in terms of talent damage. It doesn't affect the swirl damage, just the talent damage, but they all have decent multipliers. I would say 777, 888, something like that is a decent place to stop for investment. If you're meaning DPS Kazuha, and you want to do actual anemo damage, then you probably want to take the line. For weapons, it's very, very simple. If you have a high refined Zyphos Moonlight, you want to use that. Zyphos is just better fab. If you have kind of R4, at least R3, maybe R4, R5. 98% of people don't have Zyphos though, in which case fab is your best option. Kazuha hits a lot of times with skill, so you don't need to build very much crit. I have 33% crit, and I feel like I never miss my crit, so that's a perfectly acceptable amount to aim for. But if you don't have fab, or if it's busy on someone else, you can easily craft the Sting. The Iron Sting, you probably have to go for an ER Sands if you want to burst every rotation. You don't always have to burst every rotation. It depends on the team. Aggravate teams, it makes a massive difference. A lot of times, Fate teams, you might want to swirl Hydro with your infuse your burst with Hydro if your character gets a lot of damage from their Vape. If you're playing with an Electro on field like Raiden, infusing his burst with Hydro is very good, and because you'll trigger a lot of overloadeds, which does a ton of personal damage. So the burst does matter for a lot of teams. It doesn't always matter, like maybe a Mono Pyro team with Linny or something, maybe the burst doesn't matter as much, or a Novelette team, the burst doesn't matter as much. And in those cases, like for Novelette, for example, just building with Iron Sting and maxing out EM is more of your priority, and same with Mono Pyro Linny. But when you are building for an Aggravate team or an Overload team or something, then it's very important to have your burst, in which case you'll want to run Fab, or you'll need probably an ER Sands, unless you have just ungodly amounts of ER on your pieces. In an ideal world, you run either, obviously his signature is his best in slot, the Freedom Sworn, but it isn't that much better than just using Iron Sting or even the 3-star Dark Iron Sword is not that much better, and it does require you. It has the same problem that anything but Fab or Sack does, and that you need to build lots of ER to get your burst. Also, for Freedom Sword, not everyone can use the attack buff, so it's not even always that useful in a passive. You'll want to use EM or ER Sands, depending on if you're generally EM Sands if you have ER weapon, vice versa. If you don't need the ER, then you can use regardless. EM Goblet, EM Circlet, and you want as much EM crit rate. Like I have this piece has a lot of crit rate as an EM, so that's my off piece. You want to aim for 1000 EM. You don't have to hit 1000 EM for good, but he still gives a pretty big buff at 700 EM. You can also use Sacrificial Sword, which obviously it provides so much ER that you don't need the second skill for ER, but it can do good damage. So if you're playing a team that has the rotation time, so an Aggravate team, like a Quipstop team like that, Sacrificial Sword can be really good because you give more personal damage, you give more healing. It's very, very nice. But keep in mind that the VV buff starts ticking, like the debuff, it starts ticking, it only gives 10 seconds. It starts ticking from the moment you first swirl. It doesn't refresh if you swirl again. So if you use 2 skills, it can slightly reduce the amount of time that your on-fielder has to take advantage of Cosmo's buff. So that's something you do want to be aware of. The other thing I will say is if you just prefer Sacrificial to be more fun than Hog, and it's not that bad. Like, it is more fun. Sometimes I like to use it just because it's more fun and screw losing 1 extra second of uptime. But I usually end up going back to Fab just because reducing the energy cost of your other character's bursts is just so good that even when I can switch off of it, I often don't just because it's so comfortable and easy to use. It's like the shorts of swords. For other artifacts, if you're using him as a second Anemo and he's on field, you can, like with the Venti one, you can use the Thundering Fury, but I don't really recommend anyone go out and farm Thundering Fury EM set just for your second build. It's such a pain to switch artifacts around. But technically that is really fun because you just get a bajillion skills. Moving on to vertical investment. Should you get his weapon? Should you get his C1? Should you get his C2? Technically, if you get his C2, his C2 used to be like a really, really good C2. Like, it used to be one of the better C2s. The thing is, this increases elemental mastery for himself and for other characters. So it does increase his own personal damage bonus. It does increase his personal damage bonus, so it does have some benefit outside of reaction teams, but most of the benefit comes from aggravate teams or vape teams. Giving the 200 EM is very, very good, and it will make him always the superior choice in those types of teams. The teams where super such a high price to pay that versus getting constellations or weapons for your main character, your on-fielder, I don't really recommend it. Overall, I don't think it's good enough value compared to other low constellations like Farina C1. I would highly recommend something like that instead, especially since it is a C2. The C1, it basically makes it so you can use your skill more, like after your first, you can use the skill again. But if this was just you can use 2 skills, then I'd recommend it because of exploration. But because it's not, you have to use your first. Generally, that's going to be too much field time to really be worth it on a lot of teams, anyways. And so overall, it can make it easier to use this weapon, but you're losing buff uptime, which is not ideal. So overall, I would just stay away from Kazuha Constellations. I'd stay away from his weapon. I would just stick to C0. He gets all of his value basically at C0, and if you're going to invest extra Primo Gem, I wouldn't do Kazuha. I'd put it on your favorite on-fielder on their weapon or their good low, your Raiden C2 or your Yai weapon or your Utawa Homa or C1 or your Novelet C1 or your Farina C1. These days in Fontaine, basically all the new characters have really good weapons for early constellations, and I would stick to those instead of getting a Kazuha constellation.
こっちもですわ。当たりません。聞きませんわね。やっ。それ。と、こちらですわ。よし。それ。 ってみますわ。やったこっちもですわ。
Really, what terrible luck.
いらっしゃい。それじゃ聞かせて。いや、受けたってや。どうするや。
May as well. I'll never run out of money. 6,000! I'll never run out of money.
いらっしゃい。何を売るのじゃ。
It's just actually impossible.
何を売るの。なんじゃ。何を売るのじゃ。何を売るのじゃ。今後ともよろしく頼むぞ。はあ、はいはい。朝までお休みだね。なになに？はあはあ。さて、もう一眠り。
よく来たな。休養だな。休養だな。休養だな。休養だな。
Father is officially comic relief.
別のようか。
Now, I actually like this guild song. I hated pretty much every guild songs in Etrian Odyssey in the Etrian Odyssey series. This one's an exception. I quite like it. It's pretty calming. Ah.
ではな。
はあ、もう起こさないでよ。むにゃむにゃ。いらっしゃい。何を売るのじゃ。取引成立じゃ。どうするのじゃ。今後ともよろしく頼むぞ。はあ、なんだよ。いってらっしゃい。
何か用か。登録だな。他に何か気をつけるように。
なんだよ。
Emily and Bailey are characters I want to actually be used for combat, so I'll have to take that into consideration. For now, I'll start with Shie. What can we get then, Master? think Father will just be a repeat of Chie.
Yoshi, やりました。よし。よし。了解。はい。はい。はい。解放します。よし。はい。よし。覚えましたわ。覚えましたわ。ええ。覚えましたわ。 よし。
My aircon is not on. I'm happy with that.
はいはい。朝までお休みだね。さて、もう一眠い。
よく来たな。どうするのだ。別の用かではな。
じっくり何を売るのじゃ。さてさて、何のご用かの。家事をするんじゃな。 てさて、何のご用かの？装備を変えるのかよ。さてさて、何のご用かの？毎度あり。どこにしまったかな。なんだっけ。決まったら任せとけ。なになに？はあはあ。さて、はあ、コさんの朝までお休みだね。いってらっしゃい。